This goes to the issue of the effort by Kurdish forces. We heard testimony in the House. Secretary of Defense Carter and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunforth, both stated that they would be prepared to recommend providing direct military assistance to the Kurds and Sunni tribes. I would point out to the members that the Peshmerga is organized under the Iraqi Constitution. Their role is to safeguard Iraqi Kurdistan, and in particular, the Kurds are the sole U.S. allied force operating on the ground against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, and this has allowed them to conduct ongoing coordinated offensive operations in northeastern Syria and in Sinjar, Iraq. This offensive, if they're successful ultimately, could sever control of the road connecting the major ISIS-held cities of Raqqa and Mosul in Syria and Iraq. So it is very much in our interest to make certain, especially given the significant territory and the some 8 million people under that territory that's controlled by ISIS, that ISIS do not have the safe haven that they used to plan the attacks in Paris, and that frankly inspired the attacks on the United States. And to keep America safe, I believe we've got to work with our partners on the ground to eliminate these sanctuaries and deny ISIS both the space and resources to drive additional attacks. For the last year and a half, we've had one effective fighter in this fight. It is the 160,000 strong Peshmerga force. 30% of these battalions, by the way, are women fighting on the battlefields in their own battalions on the front lines against ISIS on a 650-mile front. They have proven themselves as the most dedicated and effective force against ISIS in Iraq. Not without considerable casualties, by the way. 8,500 killed and wounded on those front lines, and we're told by our friends in the Pentagon, a lot of those losses are caused by the fact that they're outmatched in firepower in terms of the weaponry on the front lines. They are poorly armed, poorly equipped, especially when compared to either the Iraqi army or the Iranian-backed Shia militias, or most crucially here, ISIS itself. Light arms from Saddam's rule, some of their material dates back to the Second World War, a lot of it's Soviet-era equipment that will break down. This isn't enough against an enemy that is determined to rip Iraq and Syria apart, butchering Iraqis and Syrians and now Americans. And so, the Iraqi military remains unable to field a joint Sunni-Shiite force. We hope they're able to do so in the future. But at this moment, they're relying instead on Iranian-backed militias to fight ISIS. On the other hand, the Kurds in northern Iraq are our best allies in the theater, the most effective local fighters against ISIS, and rather than fleeing from ISIS, they stand to fight with antiquated weapons as they continue to share with us. Last month, it was the Kurdish forces on the ground and the Americans in the air that retook Sinjar. The Kurdish forces have accompanied U.S. Special Forces on night raids, a role that will likely increase given Defense Secretary Carter's announcement last week. They would like to get those night vision goggles, by the way. So this legislation would allow the United States to directly arm Kurdish forces so that they can get the artillery, the anti-tank weapons, the long-range mortars, and the training and combat medicine that they need. This authorization, which is time-limited, would allow U.S. security assistance to go directly to the Kurdish regional government rather than routing it through the sectarian maze that is Baghdad, where they've yet to get the kind of heavy equipment that they need in this fight. The goal, obviously, is not Kurdish independence, and we make that clear in the language of this legislation. But it is to get the needed materials to the most active battlefront with ISIS. And this is urgent legislation to counter the grave and direct threats ISIS poses to the United States, and ultimately is going to require the combined efforts of all Iraqis, including the Sunni tribesmen, who have not gotten the support they desperately need from the United States. We met with them last week with some of their leadership, tribal leadership. And certainly it's going to require Baghdad to be inclusive here, to finally defeat and destroy ISIS.